My name is Zhang Xin. I'm affiliated with the School of Advanced International and Area Studies based at East China Normal University in Shanghai. I'm an assistant professor there. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to briefly talk about China's changing role in the future security landscape in the NESA region in 2020. Briefly speaking, I think we all agree with one basic fact. China's overall diplomatic and foreign policy agenda has been expanding really rapidly in the past few years. China seemed to be learning very rapidly how to behave like a true global power. And I think that's partly because of the new leadership we have in China, in Beijing, his own political ambition and leadership style. Partly that transformation comes from a set of structural factors. For example, domestic economic models that we are used to since the beginning of the 1980s seem to exhaust itself. So one very logical solution is to be more actively engaged in overseas international activities, expanding the international market, send more labor to the overseas labor market, and also engage more bilateral, trilateral economic activities with countries that are geographically more distant from China. So this is whole part of the rising China thesis. More specifically, in the NESA region, I think traditionally China has been very cautious to be directly involved in either the economic sphere or the political sphere, because that region was regarded as geographically somewhat distant from China, especially the Middle East and North Africa. Central Asia is slightly different, it's geographically close, but for a long time has been sort of detached from the core geographic boundaries of China. But things have been changing very rapidly. As I briefly mentioned, China's economic interest has been expanding really fast. And particularly in the recent state-sanctioned economic statecraft, one of the top priority set by the current Chinese government and the Chinese leadership is the so-called Belt and Road Initiative. And all the major regions in the NESA region, Central Asia, Middle East, North Africa, play a pivotal role in implementing this grandiose economic initiative. So in that sense, I think time is ripe for China to seriously think about its position in this region and whether some of the older day principles, working approach need to be at least partially modified. And we do see some recent evidence that such kind of self-examination as well as policy changes is taking place. Right? For example, late last year, China for the first time showed a very active attitude in helping facilitate the peace negotiation in Syria. And also similar attempts, we've seen similar attempts in the case of Afghanistan and also the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Right? Some of these actions or official narratives are somewhat new. So I do agree with some of the pundits in this regard that we might be witnessing the beginning of a new era of Chinese diplomacy, particularly in this area. Having said that, I think the most likely scenario for the next 15 to 20 years in China's approach to this region would show several major features. One is primarily the engagement will still focus on economic side. Political engagement will be still quite limited, and I think the Chinese state realized how complicated and how difficult to engage this area in a political or military security terms. So I think the overall tone in the political or security dimension will be still very, very cautious. But there will be some new approaches on top of what we have already seen. So far, we've seen some typical diplomatic approach and maneuver. For example, sending a special envoy to concerned countries and try to facilitate bilateral or sometimes regional level of peace negotiation. That had been one approach. And also, we've seen in several cases, China seemed to indicate strong interest to provide site within China for peace